During the Second World War, thousands of Allied airmen were shot down over Nazi-occupied Europe. Those who survived often feared what would happen next. Stories of harsh interrogations and brutal treatment circulated throughout the Allied forces, and many expected that capture would be almost as dangerous as the combat itself. Yet some prisoners encountered a man who seemed completely different from what they had imagined. Instead of shouting questions or making threats, this German officer greeted them politely. He offered cigarettes, tea, and conversation. He spoke calmly and appeared genuinely interested in their lives. His name was Hanns Scharff, a Luftwaffe intelligence officer who had become one of the most successful interrogators of the entire war. What made Scharff remarkable was that he achieved this success without relying on torture or violence. In fact, he believed that those methods were ineffective. Before the war, Scharff had spent time living in South Africa and had little interest in military intelligence. But once drafted into the Luftwaffe, he eventually found himself assigned to interrogate captured Allied airmen. When he arrived at his new post, he quickly concluded that the traditional methods being used by many interrogators simply did not work. So he developed a completely different approach. Scharff realised that Allied pilots had been trained to resist direct questioning. The moment they felt threatened or pressured, they would become cautious and reveal almost nothing. Instead of fighting against that training, he chose to work around it. Before meeting any prisoner, Scharff studied everything German intelligence already knew about them. He learned details about their squadrons, aircraft, previous missions, and even personal information whenever possible. Then, during seemingly casual conversations, he would casually mention these facts. The prisoners often became convinced that the Germans already knew everything important. If Scharff appeared to know so much already, what harm could there be in discussing a few extra details? Rather than conducting formal interrogations, Scharff frequently took prisoners on walks through the countryside. They talked about sports, families, hobbies, and life before the war. The atmosphere felt relaxed and almost friendly, yet every conversation contained valuable intelligence. Without realizing it, prisoners would mention squadron numbers, aircraft modifications, operational procedures, or small details about recent missions. Each individual piece of information seemed insignificant, but together they formed an incredibly useful picture for German intelligence. What made Scharff so effective was his understanding of human nature. He rarely asked direct questions. Instead, he encouraged prisoners to talk freely and fill the silence themselves. People naturally want to correct mistakes, add details, and continue conversations when they feel comfortable. Scharff used this tendency brilliantly. Many prisoners later admitted they never felt as though they were being interrogated at all. Some even described him as one of the most pleasant Germans they met during the war. By the later years of the war, Scharff's reputation had spread among the Allied prisoners. New arrivals sometimes heard stories about the polite Luftwaffe officer who treated prisoners with respect. Ironically, this reputation often made his job easier. The more people trusted him, the more likely they were to let their guard down. Unlike many intelligence officers of the period, Scharff understood that fear often causes people to become silent. Trust, however, encourages them to speak. And that made him extraordinarily dangerous. By the end of the war, Hanns Scharff was widely recognised as one of Germany's most successful interrogators. Yet his methods stood in sharp contrast to the brutal image many people associate with wartime intelligence work. When Germany surrendered in 1945, Scharff was captured by Allied forces. But instead of dismissing his techniques, American intelligence officers became fascinated by them. They wanted to understand how a man had extracted so much information without using threats or violence. Scharff was invited to explain his methods, and his lectures attracted significant attention within the United States military. Many of the principles he described would later influence American interrogation training programs. After the war, Scharff emigrated to the United States and built a new life far removed from military intelligence. He became an artist and lived quietly, a remarkable transformation for a man who had once served with the Luftwaffe. Today, His story remains one of the most unusual of the Second World War. At a time when countless interrogators relied on fear, intimidation, and brutality, Hanns Scharff discovered that the most effective weapon was often the one people least expected. Not violence, not threats, but kindness.